Very sad story that we have been following here over the past several days. A lot of information developing as law enforcement agencies are continuing an extensive search for Travis Decker, the man wanted for the kidnapping and murder of his three daughters in Wenatchee, that is over in Washington. Now, on Wednesday afternoon, aerial and ground operations were underway with additional federal investigators joining in on the manhunt. Authorities are on site at the Johnny Creek campground looking. Now, the sheriff's office there and partner agencies are conducting a large-scale search across the county, including local national forest and wilderness areas. The Chelan County Sheriff's Office has provided helicopters to assist in the search, and the Air Support Unit is also conducting air operations in a similar area. A reward of up to $20,000 being offered for information that leads to Decker's arrest. He is considered to be armed and dangerous. Law enforcement urging anyone with information not to approach him, but to contact authorities right away if they do see him. Now, according to investigators there, they said, quote, the numerous tips that have come in from the public is greatly appreciated, along with the many offers for assistance from off-road vehicle owners and backcountry experts to provide guide services, equipment, and even horses if needed. Again, that was a statement from investigators. Those Wenatchee girls, ages 5, 8, and 9, were reported missing on Friday, May 30th, and sadly found dead on Monday. The Washington State Patrol was contacted Friday night to request an Amber Alert, but it did not meet the required criteria, according to investigators. On Saturday, Wenatchee police detectives provided additional information, and an endangered missing person alert was issued there. Authorities searching for Travis Decker, wanted for 3 counts of first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping in connection with the deaths of his daughters. The girls' bodies were found at Rock Island Campground on June 3rd, days after they were reported missing, with preliminary examination suggesting that they died of asphyxiation. Again, a lot of information coming in here, and I do want to bring in Mike Gould, the founding member of the NYPD K-9 unit and a former lieutenant with Nassau County Police, to discuss all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today as we do discuss this very disturbing and sad story.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And first off, I do want to talk to you overall about the manhunt, the search efforts there, as we do know this man, according to authorities, has military experience. And how does that kind of change the search efforts here as they are looking for him?
Yeah, so it's complicated in one aspect, but it's simpler in the other. In a rural environment like this, it's just about communication, coordination of the assets. So when you have these multiple agencies all descending on this crime scene, so to speak, it's the coordination and communication. They have to clear certain areas. You don't want to miss them. You don't want to assume one agency looked here and another agency looked there. So coordination. Law enforcement's going in there with all the assets that we have available to us. So it's, in my opinion, all of these things, all manhunts, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when, and regardless of the person's survival skills, it might prolong it a little bit, but he's ultimately going to be captured.
And I do want to say viewer discretion advised, as some of the details are disturbing. Now, according to authorities, there was the presence of zip ties and plastic bags there. So what does that indicate about the planning, the intent behind this crime?
Yeah, so obviously, again, with that little bit of information, I can only opine that there was some level of premeditation. This wasn't a spontaneous action. And obviously, mental illness is playing a huge part of this. So from my perspective, for the manhunt part, it's really not relevant. They need to, as I discussed in many of these interviews, the best technology available to law enforcement today, as it was thousands of years ago, is a dog. The dogs are going to be, they can outperform helicopters, they can outperform drones, robots, they have night vision, they're weather resistant, they move at 30 miles an hour. They are going to be key in this environment. If it was Midtown Manhattan or Times Square, I'd have a different opinion, but dogs properly used here are going to be the key in locating this crazy person.
And a lot of tips are coming in here in large numbers, according to authorities. So when you have a massive search, a manhunt that is underway like this, how do authorities go about essentially kind of narrowing the ones down, vetting them to what is actually significant and what probably isn't?
Right. So unfortunately, at this stage of the game, they have to operate on every tip. They have to take every tip. And truthfully, a lot of times this person is going to show up. But food is the motivator for all animals. So at some point, he's going to need food. He might be able to live off the land for a couple of months or maybe longer. But in the winter, sooner or later, he has to come out from hiding. And when he comes out, it triggers motion detectors. If your dog is barking at 2 o'clock in the morning, call 911, because I can tell you your dog is barking for a reason. And sometimes people overlook the fact that your own little pet at home is a perfect alarm system that you should rely on. And law enforcement, of course, they have to investigate every lead at this point and not get ahead of themselves. A lot of times, if a person is missing for 1 or 2 days, we've been thinking in our brain that he's off to Mexico somewhere. My hunch is, Josh, he's going to be found relatively close to where he is now, in a place of familiarity. He was a survivalist. Wherever he went out and survived and practiced his survival skills, he don't want to go to a place of unfamiliarity. And movement is going to be what causes him. So he wants to hunker down somewhere and let law enforcement do their thing and let them bypass them. So law enforcement has to be careful. They don't get ahead of themselves and they slow down their search and think about the proximity. My prediction is going to be found relatively close to the scene.
One thing I want to ask about is the surveillance aspect, because in a situation like this, we're talking about rural, semi-rural areas like this, traffic cams, drones, license plate readers. What kind of surveillance is being used right now, more than likely?
Yeah, all of those things, cell phone pings, if there is. This is somewhat unusual. So I believe this is 90% wilderness, if I understand it correctly. So a lot of technology that we would normally use on an interstate or something like that is not going to be available. And that's why I go back. Actually, I can't help myself. But the dogs are the detection technology that is going to, and so, license plate readers, you have to have license plates. So there's not a lot of activity there. So I think that, and again, helicopters, drones, they're all susceptible to weather conditions. So if you think dogs have night vision, that's pretty incredible, and they're weatherproof, and they can move at 30 miles an hour. So they're going to be key to this search if they're used properly.
One thing I want to get kind of your take on, because you did serve, of course, with several agencies, is we're talking about a very gruesome crime. Again, viewer discretion advised here. We talked about zip ties, plastic bags. So I have to imagine that this is also difficult on the law enforcement officers, the different agencies that are out there working this case as well.
Yeah, of course it is, Josh. I can only speak of my own personal experience. I've been around in law enforcement for 25 years. I was at the scene of commercial airline crashes, 9/11. I've been at the scene of the most gruesome, horrific crime scenes, really, that you could possibly imagine. So with that said, I personally have a way of, I'm desensitized to it, I'm detached from it, and I compartmentalize. Maybe from a psychological point of view, that's not good. But I can't dwell on those things. I will say, for universally in law enforcement, when children or animals are the victim of these crimes, it is an extra level of emotion. But from my own perspective, you can't do this for 25 years like a surgeon in an emergency room. You have to have some level of desensitized to these things.
My last question for you here before I let you go. One big topic that has been discussed over the last several days, and I mentioned this leading into you, is that no Amber Alert was issued because authorities there said that the situation didn't meet the criteria. Could this lead, in just kind of your experience here, to maybe any kind of changes in those requirements? Are they likely to do a review of that? Because it's not clear if an Amber Alert would have helped, but obviously that's something that a lot of people are questioning.
Sure, Josh. So, yeah, we learn from our mistakes, right? So, and I don't know the exact facts of the Amber Alert or the requirements for it. But yeah, of course, these things should be modified so this doesn't happen again. I don't think an Amber Alert would necessarily be of any value in this particular case. But you try to do everything you possibly can, all the resources. My biggest recommendation or my biggest hope is that the emotional part has to subside, and people, law enforcement, which I don't think so. You got some of the best law enforcement agencies in the world working on this. So again, it's a matter of time. People have to slow down. You kind of have to remove the emotional aspect of it, because that's when people get hurt. The law enforcement get hurt. You just have to kind of slow down, be methodical. You don't want to pass by an area and find out this guy who's been hunkered down a half a mile away from the campsite, and you guys were all, the law enforcement was way ahead. So yeah, it's one of those difficult things. He will be found. Trust me.
And I'm sure he will, hopefully sooner rather than later. Mike Gould, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and discuss this, of course, based on your expertise and experience. Is there anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, just that the citizens have situational awareness. There's citizens out there, and this person is obviously he's not potentially dangerous, he is dangerous. And he's not the normal criminal. Normal, when I say normal, they don't want to make contact with humans. They stay away. But at the time that he becomes hungry and he needs transportation or something, just be aware of your motion detector lights outside. As I said earlier, your dog barking, call 911.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and helping to break it down. Obviously, the investigation continues, so I'm sure we'll have you back. Thanks again.
Thanks, Josh.